What's going on? What's going on?
Entertain the Geeky.
What about horror-themed board games or tabletop games?
Oh, yeah. There's, like, my favorite game of all time, my favorite board game is Betrayal Legacy.
Really?
Yeah. Betrayal
Okay.
Legacy, especially, does a lot of wild things with the fact that you only play through it really once.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, they have a lot of these sort of surprises and weird ideas that are brought up. There's, like, this whole component that's given sort of a Ouija board-like status. The rules say that you have to sort of make a ritual chant whenever you take it out or put it back in the box. And, of course, we did that. But it just adds to the atmosphere around the table.
Yeah, it sounds like when you play Curse of Strahd.
Right. Yeah, my favorite like bit in any tabletop game is the whole somebody leaving the room to become a traitor.
Yeah.
In Betrayal, because there is this very noticeable feeling that happens when they leave and come back, like they have become othered from the group.
Right, you're like, man, we're friends, but fuck you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's Betrayal at House on the Hill is my favorite.
For sure.
And a blast of a game, lots of replayability. I've not played Betrayal Legacy though. That sounds freaking sweet.
It is a ride.
You know what's funny? I recently, so my D&D group, we took a couple of weeks off from our campaign, and while we were doing that, I ran Merle's Truck Stop, and all of the people in my group, it was their first time playing it. And they were like, this is freaking so much fun. Where do we, can we get a copy of it? Blah, blah, blah. They were like, this is so just outside of the loop of what we expected.
Yeah, it's a good time. I love the whole, I like I said, I love like B horror a lot in camp.
Right.
So that sort of system, that one-shot system, really plays into that hand.
It does, and then with how outlandish all of the scenarios are that you roll, that you can roll out for that game, it makes it even more campy and goofy and even more fun.
Mm-hmm.
But okay, so I guess we'll try to keep this on somewhat of a track here. So, horror video games, you named a few. You said you typically like the more campy stuff. Sorry, I'm watching the kid in the background here.
Yeah.
What have you ever played a horror game and like got into it and just been like, fuck this, it's too much?
So I mentioned Outer Wilds beforehand, and that game, it doesn't really present itself as a horror game a lot until sort of the very end of the game. There is one section that is you're swimming through sort of like an underwater planet with anglerfish all around you.
Okay.
And they play these anglerfish up to be just like incredibly like disturbing and threatening, especially for me who's like afraid of things deep underwater, like
right.
Deep sea fish. So that was one where I almost stopped, and I might have because I was streaming it, I forced myself to continue. Similarly, in the opposite direction, it's not a horror game, but Dishonored 2, I had to stop playing because of the blood flies.
Really?
They're like these swarming insects, and the sound that they make is so like visceral that it just shot up my panic attacks. I was like, oh, I cannot stay here.
Just completely unnerving for you.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. That's too funny. Yeah, I remember playing Resident Evil for the first time, and the first cutscene, the first time you see a zombie, it was on Sega Saturn, as a matter of fact. I don't know if you've ever played a Sega Saturn, but there's a cutscene where this zombie turns, and it's like this over the shoulder look, and oh my god, I was like, fuck this. I never wanted to see another cutscene in that game after that. Playing the game was okay, but it totally freaked me out because I was, 6-year-old kid, maybe 7 or 8. Yeah, I think I was probably 6, 7, 8, somewhere in there. So it was just like, it looked like, something that you would see in a movie at that point in time. I was like, this is fucking terrifying, man. I don't want to see this.
Yeah. God. So here's how much of a like coward I was when I was a kid. I had no tolerance for this shit and still don't really. But so there was this game called Piglet's Big Game, and it was a kids game made by Disney, but it is unequivocally a survival horror game. Like, it has the atmosphere, the lighting, the sound design, the ambiance, the visual design of a survival horror game.
Okay.
But, like, for kids, And that was one where I got so scared as a kid that I couldn't beat it, and my mom had to beat it.
No shit.
Yeah. We just talked about it on my other podcast, Net Surfer Pro, and, like, it's a really well-made game, all things considered. Like, you would think, like, for a kid's game that's kind of spooky, it would be, like, garbage. But it has a lot of weight to it, and the mechanics are actually pretty good. Going back and playing it nowadays, I was like, oh, wow, this is, this is
a
pretty,
legit
like...
game.
This is a legit game. It's also, like, not super scary nowadays, but as a kid, I understand why I got scared of it. And I think stuff like that, like... that's sort of what shied me away from survival horror type stuff.
Okay.
Nowadays, like I said, I like the atmospheric, like, walking simulator stuff because there's much less of a threat to me and more of, like, weird things I can't comprehend, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah. I mentioned Yumeniki. It's an RPG Maker game. Like a horror game on RPG Maker that is entirely like in this giant web of surreal dreams. And that is another one where nothing really hurts you, but everything looks just kind of weird and bizarre and off-putting. And since there's no like logic to the sense of where you're going or what you're doing, it leaves a lot to interpretation, but I'm one of those people whose imagination is a lot more scarier than a monster design.
Well, what was it? There was a series similar to that. I gotta look it up here. Because it was a video game. Fudge, what was that called? Was it Dream Door? It might have been Dream Door. Oh, man. This is going to bother me now. I remember seeing previews for it. Basically, you're a kid in this shadow dream world trying to fight your way through it.
Was it 2D or 3D?
It was 3D.
Okay.
But it was very cartoony. Very cartoony. Gosh, damn it. If at any other point in time I would have been able to tell you the name of this game, this is horrible. Oh well, I guess it doesn't matter all that much. No, there's a couple of like horror themed games that have come out in the last like 5 or 6 years that kids have really gotten into though, like Five Nights at Freddy's and Hello Neighbor. Both of my kids got in, or my oldest got into those, not both of them. My oldest got into those, and he was like, "Dad, Five Nights at Freddy's is so cool." And I was like, "What is Five Nights at Freddy's?" It was like Chuck E. Cheese from hell.
Yeah. I when I first saw the game, like the very first Five Nights at Freddy's, I was like, I completely understand why this is scary, and this is the type of thing I've wanted to see in a horror game, just like fucked up animatronics.
Right.
And I think though, like the kids horror thing, I don't think it's really new per se. Like you think about like being a kid and going into a bathroom and screaming Bloody Mary or something.
Yeah.
I think kids have always been kind of interested in the macabre.
Of course.
Like nowadays, I think it's also that is now this huge market that is being directly marketed to even more than before. Maybe there's not like a moral panic around like Ouija boards or anything,
Right.
At least you don't see the like satanic panic about Freddy or Poppy's playtime.
Right. We did see it a couple of years ago though with it was that that YouTube video.
Are you talking about Slenderman?
No. There was some creepy face that would pop up in a YouTube video. It was in like kids' videos, and it would tell them to like hurt themselves and hurt their parents and stuff. And it was like basically some asshole somewhere on the internet decided to put this creepy face that would speak in these videos, and it would be like you'd be watching some sing-along thing for a period of time. Creepy.
Right, yeah. This was one of the big deals with this sort of Finger family, like...
It was Momo.
Right, yeah.
Momo encouraged child suicide, yes. And, like, my wife and I were talking about it one day, and I saw it, and I was like, Jesus, that's fucking scary.
Yeah. A lot of those things on YouTube Kids are messed up and, like, really just awful.
They really are, man. It's everything is so much more accessible now. And, like, there's so many game platforms where you can get great games for free and stuff like that. I mean, look at Fortnite. Fortnite's a huge game. You don't have to pay for it to play it. And there's more and more stuff coming out like that. And I think, wasn't Five Nights at Freddy's free?
No. It was like $5, I think.
Okay, so it was like super affordable then.
But what made Five Nights at Freddy's big was the Let's Players and the YouTubers.
Right.
It's not that they have to buy the game to play it, but they get a lot of enjoyment out of watching other people play it.
Well, that's something that I've noticed in general is like huge with kids now. Mm-hmm. Like it's the whole let's watch people play concept.
I mean, when I was a kid, I watched my brother play video games.
I would watch like my uncles play video games, but I don't know if it was like that or go outside. I would just assume to have gone outside.
Sure. Yeah.
But I was like a, Nerf gun in the woods kid, so that's
right, yeah.
That's not all that surprising. Okay, so like diving back into these horror themed games, we'll jump back to tabletop games. You said Betrayal Legacy is your go-to. Do you have any others that you're all about?
Like Mysterium is great, even though that's not really a scary game or a spooky game.
Mm-hmm.
It is about ghosts and such, but I think it's a lot more laid back.
Okay.
It sort of takes the approach to ghosts in haunted houses in a sort of almost like Victorian way, where it's very tame in comparison, but the existence of the ghost is the point. But it's a fun little co-op game where like one person's a ghost sending visions to the other people, and it has like surreal artwork on the cards because it's one of those like card association games where you try to interpret the artwork in some way.
Interesting.
But the surreal art really helps sort of the atmosphere and the theme of it being like these weird fever visions that are popping into your head from a ghost.
Yeah, that's super rad. Have you played Werewolf?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
I'm really bad at the sort of conversational social deduction games.
Okay.
Where like really the only mechanics are talking to people.
Gotcha.
And then like making a decision. Because I can like read people when there are other sort of like components in play, and I can maneuver around those situations using game mechanics for something like, I don't know, the Resistance or Coup.
Right.
But when it comes to just talking, I am very bad.
Well, and that game is like just the game is all bullshitting. You know what I mean? Like when you really get down to the nitty gritty, you want to kind of exist in this space to where you could be the werewolf, but they don't know. And that's kind of where the game, I think, is the most fun, is playing it almost in an antagonistic fashion.
Yeah.
But that's one of my favorite games for newbies, though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good one because it's very mechanics light. You can really introduce it to a large group at once and have everyone involved.
Mm-hmm.
It's great for just like a party of people who don't really play board games.
Abso-freaking-lutely. Do you have you played Eldritch Sign?
Oh god, we played one of those, because there's two games that are very similar. I think Eldritch Sign was the one I did play.
Yeah, there's two, and I think they're both by Fantasy Flight, as a matter of fact.
Yeah. And similarly, I played a bit of the Arkham Horror LCG.
Oh, okay, yeah. The Arkham Horror LCG is one of them that I was thinking of, because that's Fantasy Flight.
Mm-hmm.
What were your thoughts on that one?
I don't remember. It was a long time ago.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
The LCGs are really interesting. Like being somebody that's played Magic on and off for 20 years, basically. Like having I play formats now in Magic that are very legacy card like. There's still the trading card aspect, but everything's so available now with the internet that it's like, I don't know, Magic's basically a legacy card game now, as far as I'm concerned. The only difference is most packs I can't go out and buy and know exactly what I'm going to get. But they have packs where I can do that. So if I need cards X, Y, and Z and I know they come in that pack, I can get it. TCGs are basically legacy games now.
Yeah. The living card game format is really good if you are the type to just want to like construct decks and play constructed. But as a draft player, I mainly had experience with Netrunner, but it didn't really have a draft format.
Right. I know you were pretty into Netrunner there for a minute.
Yeah. Going back to horror.
Yeah.
I think so. Horror in board games is really interesting to me because board games, you kind of, other than legacy games that hide things in like packs and stuff, you kind of have to know all the parts of the game to play the game. So It's up to either the art design to make like something that is unsettling, which is very hard to do, the game mechanic design to like add a lot of tension, which is a little easier to do, but not much.
Right.
And then just like generally whoever is hosting the game to add atmosphere. So like a good DM can definitely make something that's eerie and, kind of creepy, very moody. But I think a lot of the horror board games kind of tend to play off of B-horror tropes, just because that's a lot easier to do successfully in board game form.
That's what I was just going to say. I think having that like more campy aspect to it, or that laughable portion of it, makes it a lot easier to kind of lean into and not fuck up.
It probably also helps that a lot of board game designers are huge nerds, and huge nerds love campy B-horror.
That's the honest to God truth.
I do think Dead of Winter is one that plays sort of tension really well.
Dead of Winter does.
Yeah, because there's a lot of risk involved in just like trying to brave the cold weather to scrounge for resources.
Mm-hmm.
There's the whole hidden trader mechanic that somebody might be a trader or they might not. And I think the like feeding people aspect is also very appropriate, because the conflict involved in like, do I get enough food for, all the survivors? Do I try to get more gasoline for the actual like objective this round? Making those hard choices, I think, plays into the raw horror that they're going for there.
I agree. Well, Dead of Winter's so high stress, man.
Yeah. Similarly, Agricola, very high stress game.
Agricola is high stress. Just I don't know. Agricola I didn't think was like horror themed at all.
It's not horror themed, but I like to joke that it is because of how stressful it is.
Just because of all the tension built into the game.
You have to eat your family pet if you want to survive the winter.
I mean, fair enough, because that is pretty horror themed.
If anything, it's at least the most accurate to like medieval Dark Ages subsistence farming.
It's like, do I have to eat my little sister if things get really bad?
Yeah. I'm trying to think of like, not necessarily games that have like, werewolves, vampires, zombies, dark trees, full moon at night, but just games where the mechanics add a lot of tension and make it so that like you're always on edge.
I think that could be a fun thing to talk about, though. So how would you because you do game design, how would you design a game that was horror themed? Like, what would you do to create that tension and whatnot? Obviously, we know you would have your brother do the artwork.
Yes,
that's a given.
Of course. Yeah, Jeff Craig, great designer, illustrator, great at video games as well, as I've alluded to. So, I think for me, if I were to make a horror game, I would probably want there to be essentially just like I think about like a lot of cooperative games that have like decks of cards that you flip over, something like that where there is like the possibility of a drastically bad outcome.
Mm-hmm.
That especially ones where the player has to sort of try and anticipate what's coming up. Like, so during a game jam, we made a cooperative game where you're like scrounging through the depths of a cruise ship. And in that one, we had sort of a whole flood mechanic where
okay, similar to like Forbidden Island.
Yeah, where like as you go on, the water pressure would increase, waves would rock the boat, and you would like take damage or lose hunger if you were in the boat or drop items. And then like as you went further down into the depths of the ship, the water pressure would increase and it got harder. And so the idea was that like just existing and trying to do the main goal means you have these risks present, but additionally each sort of room that you could be in had their own individual risks. And so it was always a gamble of like, am I healthy enough? Do I have enough food? Am I carrying too many items right now?
Do I want to go into another room and risk the unknown?
There's paranoia involved.
Yeah, I think timers or time limits are a good way to create stress in a horror game. Mm-hmm. Like when you were talking about the flooding thing, like Forbidden Island did pop into my head, and I'm like, man, if I were gonna make a horror themed game, I would use a similar mechanic to that,
right?
To stress the game, and then I would have it ramped differently, and I might do it like depending on the flavor of the game. You could take Sinking Island and turn it into an island being or not an island, but a city being overrun by zombies. And it would like very easy to do because you could be like, oh, this quadrant was just overrun, so you probably want to avoid that.
You hear that, Matt Leacock? There's your new one, Forbidden City.
Right.
Yeah. Similarly, Pandemic, the other Matt Leacock game.
Pandemic's so good too.
Yeah. Another Legacy game.
Yeah, that's true. Dude,
we did quit Pandemic Legacy because it was too stressful.
Did you?
I had like panic attacks playing that game. I was like, oh my god, we failed so much.
That's so crazy. So I recently I went to the store not that long ago, and I did not own a copy of Pandemic. Not Pandemic Legacy, just regular Pandemic. And I was like, man, this is something that everybody should have in their collection. So I was just kind of peeking around. Well, they had it in a clearance section. It was like $25 or $30, which is way cheaper than it normally is. So I nabbed that, and I nabbed a copy of Betrayal at House on the Hill because that was discounted to $35. And it was like hard not to justify that. I'm like, I don't even care if I, ever play Pandemic again, but I have to have a copy of it. Well, sure enough, the kids were like, Dad, we should play these games. They love Betrayal and Pandemic. And both are super stressful games.
Yeah.
Betrayal's a little more campy, but
really just like cooperative games tend to be very stressful because sort of by design they have to be challenging, but since you can't like count on the players to challenge each other the way a typical competitive game does, you have to create this sort of ebb and flow of difficulty. And Spirit Island is, I think, my second favorite board game, right behind Betrayal, and that is another one where I constantly panic at like, oh, we're gonna lose this game, and we never lose the game, but it feels like we will. And it's all of these cooperative games just play off like you don't know what's going to get attacked, but you know something will get attacked. If you leave it be too long, then it'll be worse. And you can't completely stop it. Those are, I think, the three tenets of this sort of timer system.
Well, I think you're right that cooperative games make for good horror themed games, because there's also that right out of the gate, the element of the unknown as far as what the other players are going to do and how they're going to affect your gameplay. Because, like, your fate is in their hands as well. What's scarier than that? You can't even save yourself.
Right. That's also why I think hidden traitors are so popular in horror games.
Oh, yeah.
Because there is the element of distrust you sow. It kind of bridges the gap between the theme and real life. You know, not that, you know, anybody's distrustful if they're a really good werewolf, but it's just that if they're playing the game and they're being distrustful, then you, the person playing the game, will be wary.
Oh, yeah.
If that makes sense.
No,
sort
that makes
of
all
the
the sense in the
role-playing
world.
really progresses that way.
Well, I think that's one of my favorite. That's one of my favorite things about the horror themed genre of games is it is easier to get, because the stress level. It's easier to get caught up in the overall flavor of the game, so you role play it better, and I think that makes it more enticing and more exciting. Just as somebody that's into escapism, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I'm gonna do this, I want to get sucked in. What's up?
By the way, Don't Wake Daddy is a horror game.
Don't Wake Daddy is a fucking horror game. And
especially if the little nightcap gets stuck in your throat because it flings it into your face. Don't do that.
I feel like there's almost a story behind that. Did you choke on the nightcap?
Oh, on my end, you're kind of glitching out there for a second.
Oh, I'm sorry. I said
the connection was all messed up. Okay.
Did you choke on the nightcap?
No, I didn't. But I think they stopped putting those in the game in further printings. Because, like, you know, children's game, put a tiny little thing in it.
I mean, that was completely dumb, but that's the same thing that Mousetrap was. I think they were made by the same company, too. There was a game before Don't Wake Daddy, and it was basically the same thing. Operation, also, you could argue, is a horror theme game. It's a jump scare game.
There was
it was a
Perfection,
board.
Was it?
Yeah, Perfection was the one. Yes, you would.
Yeah.
You had the timer, and you would put these pieces, basically puzzle pieces, in this board that would eventually explode. And the whole premise of the game was to get everything in properly before they were shot at you. I don't think they make that game anymore either. They might.
I'm not sure. Have you ever played Scatagories? Speaking of, like, classic board games here.
I have not played Scatagories since I was a little kid.
Right. So in recent printings, they have just like a typical digital timer, but we have a copy from like 95, 97 or so.
Oh yeah.
And they have the gnarliest timer. It's like an egg timer, but as it ticks, it just makes this buzzing that's like not quite quiet, but not quite loud. But then when it stops, it makes a click and a huge buzz that shakes the whole table.
Just enough to let you know it's there, yeah?
Yeah, I just need that in a horror game. Like,
give me
can
one
I just
second
get
here,
like
Matt. Sorry, the baby needed a little help there.
Like, can I just get like a random timer that sometimes will buzz really loudly and shake the entire table?
Yeah, I don't know when it's going to happen, but it could happen. That would be so easy to do with a cell phone timer. Like have a random developer do it, or have a developer do it, and oh my god, that's a great idea.
Yeah. That's something that we wanted to do when we made that Game Jam game, was just have an app that randomly will rock the boat. So that like
fantastic.
You kind of want to almost speed up your turns. There's like a hot potato element, you know?
Yeah.
Of like, I don't want to end my turn while this is going on. I want to like wait for somebody else to do it.
Heck yeah.
Hot Potato is a jump scare game.
Or musical chairs.
Yeah. Musical chairs is survival horror.
It is survival horror, and it's like, you know, who's gonna, if you fall off into the abyss if you don't land in a chair. It's terrifying. The floor is lava. survival
Now,
horror.
yeah. Now, I think that if I wanted to design a game that was like scary like that, jump scares seem to be very, I don't know, simplistic to do. I'm not sure if I'd want to do a jump scare based game. For a game to be atmospherically creepy, though, it really needs strong art direction. You at least need to like have an idea of what art style you're going for. I love RPG Maker horror because it's just like people in MS Paint throwing some blobs down and it looks really menacing and weird and uncanny. That I think would work quite well for a board game. Just like give me like the best of RPG horror in a deck of cards and play like Mysterium or Dixit with it.
See, I would totally do. I think having a random jump scare element is cool, but I think you have to figure out how to mechanically make it functional so that you don't know if or when it will happen. Like
Right.
maybe it doesn't happen at all, and that makes for something more enticing. And I think that's where like you would have to do something with like mobile development or something. It wouldn't, and I wouldn't want to put electronics in a board game, honestly, but I would.
Yeah. I mean, Return to Dark Tower just came out recently, and that's another great cooperative game where you're kind of all battling against a foe that is slowly getting more powerful. And that one used to be just a sort of battery-operated game. And I view a lot of like the phone app games as just the natural extension of battery-operated games.
Right. It makes more sense.
Mm-hmm. It's a lot more cost efficient to not have to print this giant mechanical thing.
Right.
And there's been other recent like remakes of old games, especially by Restoration Games, that once used battery powered electronics and now just use phones.
Well, I mean, if you look at 5 Minute Dungeon, I love that game, and it's you download a phone app timer and it talks shit to you while you're playing. Like, it's fun. So like I understand the necessity of it for sure. It's just one of those things. I'm like, man, there's this like board game purist part of me that's like, no, everything should be in the box. You don't need no batteries or electronics.
Yeah, and as a designer, I do like the challenge of being like, okay, how can I make this work in a way that doesn't use a program?
Right, limited resources, for sure. Yeah.
Restrictions breeding creativity.
Exactly.
Now, my
go ahead.
Favorite mechanic I would want to include in this hypothetical horror game that we haven't brought up at all is the hidden movement mechanic.
Huh.
So, a few years ago, we covered Fury of Dracula, and that is a great one because it is both like it has a lot of evocative writing in the card descriptions, but also hidden movement is just so interesting to me because it is all about not knowing where something is, and not only is it like it could creep up on you at any moment, but there is the sense of like, am I following the right clues? Am I on the right trail? It really sort of is a descent into madness. Very 23, if you know that movie.
Yeah. Well, I think you mentioned another thing there inadvertently, which is just flavor text.
Oh, yeah.
Like, flavor text is a big deal, and that goes a long way in, like, every card game. So, like, if you want to keep a game grounded in horror, I think that's a great way to do it, is you bring that, just menacing or unsettling flavor text back into it.
Right. That's what Betrayal has in spades.
Right.
Its cards don't have any art. Like, the cards that describe the events and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's only flavor text and rules text, but the flavor text really pulls its weight there.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to keep the ambiance, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so striking imagery.
Mm-hmm.
Time element, and what'd you call it? Shadow walking? Or
Hidden movement.
Hidden movement, yes. So hidden movement. What else have we said would make for
Hidden Traitor?
Hidden Traitor, yes, that goes far. And it has to be a cooperative game, in essence, right? That helps.
That helps for sure, yeah.
Because that definitely adds to the stress. Okay.
or asymmetric versus. Because Fury of Dracula is asymmetric, where one player is Dracula and all the other players are the vampire hunters.
Okay, okay, that makes sense.
That's essentially what Betrayal ends up being as well.
It does. The cool thing about Betrayal is I feel like it almost happens randomly.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
So
because it's all dependent on what the die roll is when you roll an omen that you draw,
exactly.
and where the omen was. It's made to be as random as possible.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes that so enticing, because you might end up being the traitor at some point. And that's, you're like, oh man, what am I going to do if I have to screw my friends over? Stop that, baby. I know.
Yeah, not only do you have to screw your friends over, but you have to make sure they don't know what rules you need to follow here.
Right. It's like I have to be so slimy and skeevy right now. It's not even funny.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. I think that board games... I don't think the horror board game medium is at all explored fully.
No.
There's got to be so much more room in that design space. And I think it's going to take just a lot of time and tries and designers figuring out what the board game medium does differently and independently that can make it work for a good horror experience.
I agree.
My actually forget the whole timer app and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Just have an ambient noise and or soundtrack app.
Oh, dude.
Just an app that will sometimes knock on the door or add creaking. They have all these YouTube videos that are 10 hours of silence interrupted by the Taco Bell
noises.
Bong.
Yeah,
but you could do that with creepy noises as well.
Well, you know what's funny? So you mentioned that. Do you remember the Last Night on Earth games? They came with mood music CDs.
They did.
So
that's so cool.
Yeah, you'd spend. They were crazy expensive. So you'd spend $120 on one of these giant boxes. I think it was by Flying Frog Games or something like that. Anywho. So you'd pay an obscene amount of money, and it came with several CDs of mood music and just different sound effects to use throughout the sessions.
Yeah, those sort of campaign-driven games, you have the benefit of knowing what scenes your characters are going to go into, or your players are going to do, and I think that's why horror tabletop games are so good and so popular, is because the DM has the directorial control over all that.
Agreed. I completely agree there. I think that helps drastically. Well, because when things start to get off theme or get off that feeling, you can kind of pull them back into it. Like you said, just redirecting everybody's attention back to the creepiness or the impending doom that lays just beyond the horizon.
Right. I also think, so I just sort of had this thought, there's a lot of cosmic horror and Lovecraftian horror board games. We mentioned Eldritch Sign and Arkham Horror and the Arkham Horror LCG and all that. I think, so I have to shout out, oh god, what is it? It's something words, but there's a word game where you're trying to sort of make words with cards in your hand.
Yes.
And, the cards are worth points. It's like Scrabble. But then you can, lose your mind and go insane.
Yeah, it's, forbidden words or something like that.
Yeah.
It's you're basically trying to make a phrase that summons Cthulhu.
Yeah. But then as you lose more sanity, you can't make, normal English words. You have to make gibberish.
Yep.
And I have to shout that out because Jeff always brings that game up when we talk about this type of topic.
It's a good-ass game, though.
It's such a fun idea. Another one that really plays into the role-playing aspect of encouraging players to sort of embody the rule set. And I think that that's another great example of, it's not necessarily... I mean, it is horror, but it definitely uses the horror aesthetic more than I think the outright fear or terror that can happen. But it does so in a way that I think leads to a really memorable experience. because like this is sort of like there's Halloween themed games, and then there's
Right.
horror themed games, and then there's horror games.
Yeah.
And it's more of a horror themed game, but I think those are still very interesting and fun.
Well, like talking about this here, it's made me like, oh man. So if I at some point or another, I'll sit down and start like designing another game. I think the next one that I do, I would want to be horror.
Mm-hmm.
I think that'd be a blast, and just try to make the game as absolutely stressful as possible.
Yeah, see, for
Not
me,
impossible though.
Right, yeah. You want it to seem impossible until you win.
Exactly.
For me, for being so like scared of things, I don't know if that would make me a good or bad horror designer. You know, like, would it be like, oh, this is something that would, you know, mess with my head? Or is it like, oh, this is something that not many other people will be, you know, affected by?
Well, you pick up on cues a little more easily than I think the average person does, so you understand what's actually making you tick at a given point in time in those games. So I think because of that, you could design one fairly well.
Mm-hmm. Now, like, the aesthetics of like monsters and ghosts and like cryptids and stuff, I love that.
Right.
There's one video game I wanted to mention earlier that I never got around to, which is Luigi's Mansion. Luigi's Mansion is fantastic. I'm gonna play it on stream pretty soon because it's, you know, Halloween season.
Right.
But like that is another one where it's not really scary. It might be to like a you know, a toddler, but like the usage of just a haunted mansion filled with ghosts that has like these weird, like, you know, puzzles and passageways. Something will drop down from the ceiling and kind of shake its tongue at you. I love that type of thing.
Well, I think that's just Mario, you know?
Yeah.
Like, you put him in a little bit darker of a place with Luigi's Mansion, and you have more booze around.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, that's a pretty typical Mario game.
Sure. Oh, there's also the piano in Mario 64. Gotta love the piano from Mario 64.
I had honestly forgotten about Mario 64.
So that it's really funny because there was a whole renaissance of Mario 64 related like creepypasta and internet horror stuff recently.
Okay.
Some of it were like ROM hacks of Mario 64 made to be very unsettling, like just off of what Mario normally is. There was a whole sort of I don't know how familiar you are with creepypasta.
Not very.
Them basically being like the internet version of urban legends and scary stories.
Okay.
Things that are like posted on a message board and then copied around and made to sound really spooky. There was one that was like talking about Mario 64 like changing itself to adapt to the player's unconscious desires, but that would always make it really weird and creepy. There was also a whole thing about like how one of the worlds in Mario 64, Wet Dry World, has this like really negative feel to it that's like very depressing and sort of dark, but nobody could explain why. There's just all these sort of things converging about like Mario 64 being this creepy experience. And it was both really funny and also like some people got really creative with it.
I mean, I feel like somehow, some way, that's almost how the Mario games are, though. I feel like they all have that like horror-esque aspect to them.
Nintendo loves putting like surprise weird details in their games.
They do a good job at it too, though.
Shouts out to the Hell Valley Sky Trees from Mario Galaxy 2. That's a fun one. Of course, for talking about creepypastas, you can't forget Ben Drowned, which spawned from the Elegy of Emptiness mask. The Elegy of Emptiness song from Majora's Mask.
Yep.
Yeah. Lots of fun bits like that just remind you that it's like, hey, you know, just because it's all bright and sunny doesn't mean that it's always bright and sunny.
Right.
Sometimes they like to sneak in a little fun as a treat. A
They
little spooky.
Yeah, I was gonna say they definitely sneak in like a few little jabs here and there that are just enough to be like, oh, that's fucked up. But I still want to play it.
Yeah, it's great. I love Metroid Dread. I played that, when it came out, and that just pretty much outright has just like big monster chasing you moments that are pretty stressful to deal with, but like it's pretty refreshing for a Nintendo game, even if it's Metroid, which is one of their darker series anyways.
Right.
It's just like, oh, this is like a new experience for me for this type of game, for this series. Something that I can't really stop, that I have to like stay away from, stealth away from.
that I have to run.
Yeah.
There's no surviving that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that always makes the insurmountable odds like that always make for something that's exciting and it'll get you sucked in. Like if I'm supposed to be scared right now, that'll definitely do it. I'm completely surrounded by enemies that could crush me just because of the sheer numbers.
It's the unstoppable enemy that I think really gets me.
Okay.
You got like the Mr. X and Nemesis from Resident Evil.
Okay.
In Sonic Adventure, in Amy's storyline, there is a big robot that chases you that you can't kill. You can only like briefly stun. That got to me as a kid. It's the feeling that like you can't fight this thing, so your only option is to run or delay the inevitable.
Right.
Whereas like if you can, shoot down a bunch of zombies, it goes from feeling like a game where you need to run away from them to just like a power fantasy of like lawn mowing through a bunch of grass.
Right. How can I find a way to kill as many as possible, as quick as possible? Yeah.
Which is still fun to me. I'm a big fan of Vampire Survivors, but like it's a completely different dynamic at that point.
It is. You're 100% right. Well, we're cutting it close on time now. What are some things that you're doing that you'd like to let the listeners know about, and some things that you're excited about here?
So I've already alluded to and mentioned Net Surfer Pro, my other podcast where I talk about internet media and just sort of do analytical deep dives into different media around the 21st century, usually things related to the internet. So like we've covered a lot of movies, video games, TV shows, music, and just sort of internet media, like internet videos, memes, such like that. And for October, we have been doing Spooky Month, where we've talked about Super Mario 64 creepypasta. We talked about Piglet's Big Game.
Okay.
We're going to cover Analog Horror Series next, which is sort of a whole horror subgenre that's popped up in the last 5 to 10 years.
Okay.
And then last year, we covered a whole bunch of creepy video game related things like Pets Cop or Catastrophe Crow and Ben Drowned, of course.
Of course.
And then I also want to plug my stream, twitch.tv/twack.
Yeah.
TWAK, where I stream during the week. I am planning on streaming Luigi's Mansion, as I said. I just finished playing through the first Pikmin all the way, which is a great game. That is
a dope-ass game, dude.
It's goated, and it's also one of Nintendo's great post-apocalyptic hits. They love making post-apoc games.
They really do.
Kirby does it twice.
Yes, he does, doesn't he? I never even thought of that.
Kirby 64 has Earth frozen over.
Yep.
And the newest one is just Kirby goes to Earth.
That's
goes
crazy.
to like Walmart.
Yeah, that's definitely post-apocalyptic.
It's like Wall-E, but Kirby. And then also in November, let me get this right, 11th, 14th, 16th, and 18th, I'll be doing charity streams to raise money for the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation.
Oh, that's right.
Which is a charity that's really near and dear to me. I'll be streaming Fortune Street, and then probably one of the Pajama Sam games.
Nice.
Because I've been playing through all the Humongous Entertainment point-and-click adventure games. And then some randomizers that I'm really excited to try out on stream. The Witness randomizer and La Mulana 2 randomizer.
That's going to be freaking sweet.
Yeah. So that'll be a solid week, give or take, of streams for charity.
Hell yeah. That's fantastic. And that's twitch.com/twack.
Twitch.tv/twack.
Yeah, I'm sorry. .tv/twack. Yeah, I'm not used to the whole .tv/.com thing. I'm so old, I've not realized yet that we're doing .fm and .tv now with regularity.
Yeah, there's so many weird subdomains or like whatever they're called. There's like .pizza, .men. I've heard. Yeah.
.pizza?
Yeah. Shoutouts to Axe.pizza.
Holy shit, that's brilliant.
Best Pikachu player.
Yeah, I love that. I love that.
I love pizza as well.
Just using something off the wall as the proverbial .com or .net.
Mm-hmm.
That's magical.
It makes it a little bit more memorable at times.
It really does. Yeah, if you're like, go to domino's.com.pizza or domino's.pizza instead of domino's.com, like it's like, oh yeah, no, I need to go there to get pizza.
Yeah, it's the pizza place.
Exactly. You would be the one and only at that point. No, that's brilliant. We need to I need to buy a bunch of domains and subdomains with just off the wall shit like that.
Mm-hmm.
My wife would be like, "Why'd you spend $4,000 on domain names?" I'd be like, "Well, I've got all the .pizzas, so when Domino's and Pizza Hut come a knocking, we'll be able to sell this shit like real estate."
The highest risk domain troll. It's like squatting in Antarctica.
Oh man, I had somebody try to sell me one. It was for Who Wears the Pants, that podcast. I had reached out about purchasing the domain whowearsthepants.com, and somebody was like, yeah, $16,000 and it's yours. And I was like, yeah, you can fuck yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I have whowearsthepantspodcast.com, so I'm good. And they're like, well, do you want to make a counteroffer? And I was like, no. I was like, you're on drugs if you think I'm going to pay that for this website. And they're like, well, how much would you pay? I'm like, I won't pay for it. I would pay $20 like I did for the one that I got.
Yeah.
That's it. Oh,
I wonder if there's a .pants subdomain.
Oh man. Well, the thing is so I have 2 episodes that I actually need to edit for that show right now. I've been holding on to them for a minute. It's the last 2 episodes, and it's this weird thing where like I know we're done recording it, and I know as soon as I post them, it's over, and it's like this very daunting thing to actually get them done. I don't want it to be over yet, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's like it's pulling at my heartstrings a little, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, okay, so people need to be paying attention to you on Twitch.
Mm-hmm.
How many? You said you're streaming most weekdays, right?
Yeah.
Sweet.
If I'm not recording or editing a podcast, then I'm streaming.
Hells yeah. Are you making money on it?
A little bit, yeah.
Boom!
I am a Twitch affiliate. There are some fun emotes there. See if you can spot the references in all of them.
See, I'm trying to get affiliate right now. Like, I've never dived into Twitch the way that I should have. So now I'm like starting to try to do it more.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm horrible at twitching.
It's about consistency, finding a community. Like, a lot of my followers came from like speedruns and fighting games that I play.
Right.
But like, if you're just like a new variety streamer, then it's impossible. It seems.
For the most part, I stream Overwatch.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been fortunate there because that has a large following right now. But yeah, I don't know. I'll dick around with that later, and I'll pick your brain on it at some point, I'm sure.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, thank you for hanging out.
Yeah, thanks for having me back on.
Of course.
After all these years.
Right? We'll do it again soon.
Yeah.
I've had trouble getting hold of Jeff recently, but as soon as I get a hold of him, I'm going to try to get him on one as well because he's always fun to have.
I mean, that man's very busy.
I can imagine. I mean, you know, newly married and all that fun stuff.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a lot on his plate. But I don't know. Next, I think if whenever I'm able to get a hold of him, we'll schedule like an in-person podcast.
Yeah.
And we'll all get together and do something with that. I think that'll be fun. And we can, I don't know, maybe we could, I think it'd be cool to, because you love doing game design, maybe go through and just make a bullshit game.
Mm-hmm.
Just on the fly there just to kind of show everybody what game design is like.
Well, the thing is, game design is 90% playtesting.
Oh, 100%.
So we can't do that all on a podcast episode.
No, but we would definitely be able just to show them like how we get our skeleton.
Yeah.
You know, the thing that you from there have to flesh out. And yes, you were 100% right. Playtesting is where you find out how broken your initial idea actually was.
Yeah. And yeah, who knows? Maybe we'll be able to get you on Net Surfer Pro sometime.
Maybe you just holler at me. I'll come do Net Surfer.
Talk about a shitty movie or something.
I love it. All right, man. Well, hey, you enjoy the rest of your day, brother.
Mm-hmm. You too.
All right, see ya.
See ya.